What's happening? Happy hump day to you and yours. Thanks for joining us as always. It is very much appreciated. We will be getting to the Patriots coming up in a little bit, but I wanted to start with the Eastern Conference Finals. How could you not start with that crazy bananas basketball game last night at the TD Garden? Celtics up 1-0 in the Eastern Conference Finals after winning in overtime 133-128. Insane finish. Absolutely insane finish. Now, everybody that I saw last night on Twitter, they were thinking one of two things, right? They were thinking, what a great game. Celtics somehow survived, found a way to win. Others people said, hey, look, the Pacers choked. Now, the Pacers certainly did not help themselves, but let's not act like that turnover with about 8 seconds to go in the fourth quarter was Tyrese Haliburton throwing the basketball into the fourth row. Jaylen Brown had to shoot that gap. He had to make the defensive play, and he made the defensive play. On top of that, after making that play, you don't necessarily get that game handed to you. You've got to make that shot. You've got to drop the play that Joe Mazzulla drew up, and Jaylen Brown has to keep his feet inbounds, tucked in the corner on the floor. Somehow, some way, with Siakam right in his airspace, he knocks that shot down. Big-time shot with a few seconds left on the clock. And, of course, you also have to come back on the other end and defend, which the Celtics did. The Celtics defended. Tatum picked up Haliburton, really forced Haliburton after Haliburton took his time a little bit for a couple of seconds. Tatum forced Hallie to take a very, very difficult shot. So, yes, the Pacers certainly helped the Celtics come back. That's going to happen all the time. That's going to happen in these close games, right? I mean, yes, there's one team that helps you stay and hang around and possibly, quote-unquote, steal the game. But the other team also has to make plays. It's just not black or white. And so I thought, looking at that game last night, the Celtics, they still had to make plenty of plays to win that game. Even with the turnover, even with Haliburton dribbling it off his knee with about 30 seconds left in the fourth quarter, the Celtics still needed to make plays. You still needed Brown to get that hand on the basketball and make it tough on Siakam on the inbounds play. You still needed the three in that corner. You still needed Tatum's defense against Haliburton. You still needed an overtime in which Jason Tatum took over. All of those things still had to happen for you to win that game last night. So it's not just 100% to 0. It's not black or white, at least in my mind. For the Jason Tatum can't close crowd, that was a rough night last night for that crowd. He had 10 points in overtime. Tom Habestraw posted this last night. Tatum's 10 points in overtime is the most for any player in a playoff game since 2021. Tatum hit a huge three to put the Celtics up by 4 with 42 seconds left on the clock in overtime. He had that three-point play against McConnell. He had that big-time three with 42 seconds left. He hit some free throws towards the tail end of the game. Tatum showed up. Tatum showed up in overtime precisely when you needed him to. And people will get wrapped up into this idea of, oh, well, he took a fall away against Miles Turner after he grabbed an offensive rebound late in that game. Yes, I'm not sure if he truly knew how much time was left, and that's why he rushed the shot. People act as if off that offensive rebound, he'd be able to go right back up. That's not true. That's not fair. Go back and watch the replay. Tatum gets the rebound, right? Falls to him, and Turner is right there protecting the rim. Now, what Tatum could have done is dribble out, buy some time, and maybe try to hit a three, try to find a teammate. But the fall-away shot is because Tatum wanted to get something up, and Turner is protecting the rim in that situation. But let's look at Tatum's game. 36 points, 12 rebounds, 4 assists. The guy was all over the place. He finished this game with a plus 20. So an overtime game in which you won by 5 points. Tatum had 10 points in overtime and finished the game with a plus 20. He had that final defensive stand against Haliburton in regulation. You don't win this game without Jason Tatum. Tatum also helped carry you in the third quarter. Right before Joe Mazzulla, for some unknown reason, decided to take Tatum out for the final 3 minutes or so of that third quarter when Indiana went on a 14-2 run. I mean, if you want to know the impact of Tatum, if you want to understand why he actually helps you win, go back to last night's third quarter. Watch that quarter again. Watch it from beginning to end. The Celtics played one of their best stretches of basketball in that third quarter, led by Tatum. Mazzulla takes Tatum out. All of a sudden, Indiana goes on a 14-2 run. Do you think that's a coincidence? Do you think it's a coincidence that the Pacers go on a 14-2 closeout run in the third quarter as soon as Mazzulla pulls Tatum? I don't. Look at the impact he makes on both ends of the floor. Look at how much they ask him to do. He's defending Halliburton. He's defending Miles Turner. He is setting screens, which, by the way, not a ton of superstars set screens, if you were wondering. Tatum is a willing and capable screener on offense. And he is screening an awful lot during these games, and that's taking a physical pounding. So he plays defense 1 through 5. He sets screens. He creates for his teammates. He scores the ball. He rebounds. I'm at the point where if Tatum doesn't score 50, shoot 60% from the floor, 40% from 3, make every single free throw, and make multiple quote-unquote clutch plays, people are not going to be happy with him. Honestly, that's how it feels. Not everybody, but some people. This guy has to put up a 50 burger on ridiculous shooting, rebound, defend, also score in the clutch. Do all of it. Just do all of it. Do everything. Do everything flawlessly. And then maybe people will say, man, he was awesome. I don't know what else you want. Anthony Edwards shot, 6 for 24 in a game 7 just a few days ago. And I saw people tweeting and posting, and I saw people talking on TV and radio with these old, tired-ass narratives. Everybody was pumping Anthony Edwards. And this is not a shot to Edwards. Edwards has been terrific for the most part, right? He's 22 years old. He's a stud. This is not about Edwards. This is how people irresponsibly cover these games and cover these athletes. I saw a bunch of Edwards praise the other night after he shot 6 for 24 in a game 7. Yet there's Tatum doing what he did last night, 36-12, 4-3, a plus 20, defending, scoring 10 points in overtime, and people are still looking at 2 or 3 plays. Oh, well, he settled for this 3 in this moment. Oh, well, he took the fall away against Miles Turner. Oh, he had an ugly turnover on the miscommunication with Drew Holiday. Matt Moore of Action Sports, he posted this last night because he was posting some things about Tatum in the negative plays. Finally, Matt Moore looked at the big picture, and he tweeted, I was so caught up with Tatum's fadeaway on the offensive rebound and the turnover that I overlooked the clutch scoring, the big 3, and the overall numbers. This is the problem with the national narratives and even some of the narratives locally. This is the issue. There is a nonstop autopsy of every single minute that Jason Tatum plays. And because people continue to throw out there that he can't close, even though he's closed plenty of games. By the way, you can check out a column I wrote last week at Boston Sports Journal, which chronicles what Tatum has done in the postseason. It might surprise you. This guy's played 105 playoff games, and he's only 26 years old. He has closed out plenty of big games. He has carried this team in multiple big games. And people just forget that. In this narrative of he can't close, he's not an alpha, he's not tough, he's not emotional. I tweeted last night at Nick C Radio. After the and one, he screamed into the crowd. That enough for you? Or does he need to do that every single possession? And then if Tatum was doing that every single possession, you know what people would say? He's being over dramatic. He's being performative. That's how this works. I'm not telling you that Tatum is flawless. I'm not telling you he's the greatest player ever. I'm not even telling you he's top 3 in the league because I don't think he is. But this nonstop autopsy of every single possession that Tatum plays is ridiculous. It is gosh damn ridiculous. And it's got to settle down at some point. I didn't hear anybody talking about Anthony Edwards shooting 6 for 24, and I think 2 of 10 from 3 in a game 7. I heard about the Timberwolves fighting and finding a way. Like, what are we doing? So there's so much emphasis on the 3 or 4 plays that Tatum messes up on versus all the other plays throughout the basketball game, including the fourth quarter, including overtime last night, they get overlooked. It's irrational. It's irrational. Look at the entire performance. Do the Celtics even have a chance to force that game into overtime if Tatum doesn't do what he did in the third quarter to build that 10-point lead before he's taken out, or a 12-point lead, whatever it was? Are they even in that position? It's just nonsense. Do not overlook the overall impact that Tatum has on the entirety of a game because you're focused on 2 or 3 plays that help build this perception from the national narrative and even, again, some of the people locally that this guy can't do this, he can't do that. Moving on. Jrue Holiday was tremendous. I will get to the Patriots in a few minutes. Trust me. Patriots still have an opportunity possibly to trade for a wide receiver 1. We'll get into that in a little while. But Jrue Holiday was tremendous. 28, 7, and 8. He had 20 points in the second half, 10 of 16 from the field, 4 of 8 from 3. He was awesome defensively, tightened the screws on Tyrese Halliburton. Jimmy Stewart from 98.5 posted last night that Halliburton was 0 for 5 with 2 turnovers with Holiday as the primary defender. We always talked about winning plays with Marcus Smart. That's what you got. That's what you got from Jrue Holiday over and over and over again, winning plays. You don't win that game last night if Jrue Holiday is not out there doing what he did, especially in the second half. He took over. I mean, it was Tatum in the third quarter. Then Holiday showed up right in the fourth quarter. Then it was Tatum in overtime. Brown mixed in a couple of gigantic plays, including the 3 that pushed it into OT. But Jrue Holiday was just awesome last night. All right, I got some more thoughts, but first I'll tell you this show is brought to you by Warzone Paintball and Airsoft. Warzone has 9 maps on 30-plus acres of land. We're talking multiple villages, hilltop forts, paintball, airsoft, and airsoft, something for every age group, starting at 6+. You show up with jeans, good shoes, long sleeve shirt. They'll take care of the rest. Low-key, casual atmosphere, a fantastic staff. If you like paintball, if you like airsoft, check out Warzone Paintball and Airsoft. They're in North Kingston. As we get better weather, it's warm outside today. You want to hang out with some friends, go check those guys out. Again, North Kingston. The phone number is 401-228-6366, 401-228-6366. Tell them the Nick Cattle Show sent you. So Holiday was awesome. Yesterday's podcast, we talked about this. As we preview this series, if you listened to the podcast yesterday, we nailed this damn thing. I say that with some humility, but I say it with confidence. We nailed what Indiana is. If you listen to this podcast yesterday, we said, pay attention to the 3-point line. Celtics have to win the 3-point line, right? Indiana limits 3-point attempts. Indiana limits 3-point makes. Indiana, meanwhile, a pretty good shooting team from 3, especially Halliburton, right? So you've got to win the 3-point line. The Celtics last night were a +6. They were a +6 at the 3-point line. They won by 5. I also told you that Indiana, they foul a ton. Indiana sends the opposition to the free throw line a bunch. What happened last night? Celtics were +15 at the free throw line. That's been a problem for Indiana all year long. We underlined it yesterday. It played out last night. That's why when you watch this podcast and you like/love what we do here, don't forget to hit that thumbs up on YouTube as you watch the content. Always appreciate the thumbs up. That's how we beat that algorithm. So like, comment, and subscribe. And when I say subscribe, it doesn't cost you anything to subscribe to this podcast. Nothing. I'm not asking for memberships. So like, comment, subscribe, trying to hit 3,500 subscriptions, hopefully by mandatory minicamp. Rate and review on Spotify, Apple Pods. Just a couple more numbers before we get to the Patriots. The Celtics had 30 assists last night. That is a great number. We also talked about the paint points. Indiana scores a ton in the paint, but they also have one of the worst defenses when it comes to giving up points in the paint. The Celtics were +2 in the paint last night, 58-56. Both teams scored a ton of points in the painted area. And I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if Indiana in totality can play better than they did last night against this Celtics team. I mean, Indiana shot 53.5% from the floor. They shot 37% from three. They had 38 assists, which is just an insane number. They even beat the Celtics on the glass. They were +1 on the glass. Now, the one thing that Indiana did not do well is take care of the basketball, which is very uncharacteristic of them. They usually don't turn the ball over a ton. Last night, they had 22 turnovers. But I would also say to you, the Celtics defense can be much better. I thought they could have been more disciplined. I thought they could have played with more force. They could have impacted the ball more consistently. They began the game on that 12-0 run. That urgency on defense to start the game is what I want to see for all 48 tomorrow night. They are capable of doing that. The drop coverage wasn't great. But I think the Celtics, they did not commit themselves defensively throughout that entire game last night. They got up 12-0. They took their foot off the pedal defensively. They allowed the Pacers to get into transition. They gave them some easy looks from three, some of that due to the drop coverage. But the Celtics can play better defense than they did last night. There's no doubt. Sean Grandy on Twitter pushed back on that, said this is for the Boston was terrible defensively game one narrative. The Pacers scored 1.143 points per possession, which is well below their season average. Of their 96 games this year, that would rank 67th. In 30 games with that offensive rating or lower, Indiana is now 3-27. So you could look at it and say, man, I don't know how much better Indiana can play offensively against this specific Celtics defense than they did last night. You can look at Miles Turner and Obi Toppin being ridiculous. Turner was 9 for 13 and 3 for 4 from three. Toppin was 6 of 8 and 1 of 2 from three. Toppin and Turner shot a combined 15 of 21 from the field and 4 of 6 from three. I ask you, do you anticipate Miles Turner and Obi Toppin shooting that well throughout this entire series? I would say no. Some would say, well, Nick, Halliburton didn't shoot well last night. That's going to even out. Halliburton was 8 for 18 from the field. I would push back and say Halliburton was 6 for 14 from three, and 2 of those threes were ridiculous. The end of the first half three from like 35 feet, and then the falling all over off 1 foot off the glass three to end the third quarter. I would also tell you that the Celtics are trying to take Halliburton out of the game, right? So if they continue to defend Halliburton like they did last night, and Halliburton shoots 8 for 18, 8 for 20, and the other guys don't go bananas like they did last night, the Celtics are going to be in good shape. At least that's how I feel. With that said, the C's absolutely need more from their bench. Hauser was brutal last night. Luke Cornett got torched in the first half against Turner. He has to be better defensively. And I thought Peyton Pritchard allowed TJ McConnell to get off a little bit. Those guys need to be better. I don't understand. Well, let me scratch that. I do understand why Joe Mazzulla fouled up by 6 with like 13 seconds to go. The idea is this is a 2-possession game. Don't let Indiana hit a 3. But I absolutely hated that decision. Hated it. I think it's beyond idiotic to foul a team when you're up by 6 with 13 seconds left. Just play defense. Play defense. The clock is your friend. To intentionally foul, you are stopping the clock. You're allowing Indiana to score at the free throw line. And then you're allowing Indiana to set up their inbound defense and possibly cause a turnover. 13 seconds left in that game. Just play defense. Play defense, get a stop, get a rebound, game's over. Hated fouling up by 6. That's overcoaching to me by Joe Mazzulla. Overcoaching. I also hated the challenge 35 seconds into the game, but hey. Last thought before we get to the Patriots. Because game 1 was the way it was, maybe, just maybe, the Celtics will get that game 2 monkey off their back. That's my hope. What tends to happen in these series is the Celtics, they come out absolutely hammering the opposition, right? They get up big. They relatively cruise in the first game, and then they go out there in game 2 and take it for granted. And they end up losing game 2 at home. So hopefully, last night, overtime, back and forth battle, the Pacers proved on, I think, 3 different occasions that they can come back from a double-digit deficit. Maybe the Celtics walk into tomorrow night, game 2, saying, all right, we got to take this team seriously. We can't take this for granted. We need to protect home court. Hopefully that's the way they show up tomorrow night and take care of business. All right, let's jump to the Patriots. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe for free, rate, and review. Patriots, I think all of us would agree, still need a number 1 wide receiver, right? I'm here to tell you that the idea of a trade for that wide receiver 1 is not dead yet. Here are some updates. T. Higgins, this was according to Adam Schefter, who posted, Higgins has still not signed his franchise tender. He's not expected to by next week. That would make him ineligible to report back to the Bengals in time for their OTAs. Higgins cannot rejoin the team until he signs. Ian Rappaport wrote that Higgins is the only franchised or transition tagged player without a long-term deal, which led Miguel Benzin, Pat's cap, on Twitter to post, this strengthens my argument for Higgins to file a grievance. Pat's cap says, it is clear the Bengals have no intention of extending him. T. Higgins could absolutely file a grievance against Cincinnati, and he could say, they used this franchise tag to keep me hostage. They had zero intention of signing me to a long-term deal. The idea of the franchise tag and the transition tag is that teams are acting in good faith. They are placing that transition tag or franchise tag on the player to work out a long-term deal. So Higgins, if he wanted to, I don't know if he's going to, but if Higgins wanted to, he could absolutely file a grievance against Cincy and tell the league and tell the arbitrator, hey, look, I'm filing this grievance because Cincy put the franchise tag on me, and they have no intention of offering me a deal that's good enough. They have no intention of signing me long-term. So this is a misusage of the franchise tag. Something to keep an eye on. Again, I'm not sure he'll do it, but it's within his rights. CeeDee Lamb, Ian Rappaport, says that the Cowboys, they began their OTAs yesterday. CeeDee Lamb, no show at the voluntary work. Lamb is set to make $17.99 million this year on the 5th-year option of his rookie deal. He's eligible for the franchise tag in 2025, but he wants to be paid as one of the top receivers in the NFL now. Nick Kosmader from The Athletic wrote about Courtland Sutton. He skipped the team's voluntary strength and conditioning workouts. He's not required to attend the Broncos OTAs, of course. The first mandated attendance of the offseason for the veteran wide receiver will happen June 11th at the 3-day minicamp. Courtland Sutton, who has never missed voluntary team workouts before this year, is angling for an extension to a contract that has 2 years, but minimal guaranteed money remaining. General Manager George Patton said after the draft that both he and Sean Payton have had productive conversations with Sutton and that the receiver is in, quote-unquote, a good place. So Courtland Sutton wants to get paid. He's not happy. He ain't showing up right now. CeeDee Lamb wants to get paid. He's not happy. He ain't showing up right now. T. Higgins wants to get paid. He's not happy. He ain't showing up right now. And he could file a grievance if he really wants to be a hair across the tuk-tuk of Cincinnati and tell Cincinnati, hey, look, either pay me or get rid of me because this is ridiculous. You have no intent on signing me to a long-term deal, so take this franchise tag off me and trade me somewhere to a place that's going to actually pay me what I want. Meanwhile, Justin Jefferson, not at OTAs. He wants to get paid. He's not happy. He ain't showing up. Brandon Ayuk, same story. He wants to get paid. He's not at OTAs. He ain't going to show up there. So this is a continuance of what has been happening throughout this offseason. Really, nothing has changed. Ayuk wants a deal. Jefferson wants a deal. Higgins wants a deal. Courtland Sutton wants a deal. Meanwhile, some of these other deals that have been signed continues to push the market up, which makes it tougher for some of these teams to justify the deal. Are the Bengals going to be willing to justify a contract extension with Higgins and pay him what he's asking for when you compare him to all these other contracts like Amon-Ra St. Brown? Courtland Sutton wants to make the bank, but he's still signed for 2 more years. Is Denver going to bend over backwards to make that happen? So all of these guys who have had issues, they continue to have issues. Now, for me, I'm less enamored with the Cortland Sutton idea that I was before the draft because you drafted Javon Baker. And, Javon Baker is somebody who could get the reps, could develop as that X receiver that you want, not cost you what Cortland Sutton's going to cost you as far as draft pick compensation and money. Sutton's 29 years old. So I wouldn't be rushing to trade for Cortland Sutton right now. I would be patient with that option if it is an option. I'd wait this out and see how Javon Baker looks throughout the camp process. And if you have questions about him, if you have questions about Jalen Reagor, if KJ Osborne keeps dropping the football like he did in the first day of OTAs, then maybe you have a little bit more desperation to go out and find somebody like that. But right now, I would give reps to Javon Baker and Ja'Lynn Polk, and I'd see what those guys can do. You could argue that, they're not going to give you the production that Cortland Sutton would probably give you. But you could argue that developing those two young receivers is more important than what Sutton can give you in a vacuum this year. I don't think CeeDee Lamb's going anywhere. Jerry Jones and his history with wide receivers, I think Lamb gets his contract extension. You've got Dak Prescott's unknown future. So if somehow, some way they don't extend Dak, which I do think they eventually will do, but if something happens with Dak and you have to go to a young quarterback, you want CeeDee Lamb around. So I don't think Lamb's going anywhere. I don't think Justin Jefferson's going anywhere. We've talked about it. Minnesota has gone on the record a ton publicly saying that their number one priority is to get a Jefferson extension done. They just drafted J.J. McCarthy. They're in a win now kind of mode. And the thing that makes the most sense for Minnesota is to give J.J. McCarthy the weapons that are on that roster right now. Addison, Jefferson, and company. I don't think Justin Jefferson is going anywhere. My number one option remains Brandon Ayuk. It's been that way for a while. He's young. He's 25 or so. He's young. He's versatile. He can play inside. He can play outside, but he is a true X wide receiver. He's a legitimate bona fide number one. I don't know if you can make that argument about Cortland Sutton. I don't know if you'd make the argument that Sutton is truly a number one guy, right? He might be a 1B. He might be a 2. You might even have an issue with saying that with T. Higgins, a bona fide number one, given that Higgins played with who he played with the last couple of years. So, to me, Ayuk is absolutely a number one receiver in the NFL. He's a top 10 guy. He's young. He's versatile. He's productive. Higgins would be my number 2 option because he is a legit X receiver. And if you don't want to put a lot on Javon Baker, then you let him develop and you show patience with him. You bring Higgins in, and now you've got that number one guy to go along with some of your younger receivers that you have. And again, I've said this, the Patriots' depth in the wide receiver room, at least from 2 to 5, is much better than it was before, right? They don't have that bona fide one. We all agree. But if you look wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 5, they've got quality depth. They have some pop potential, no pun intended. They've got youth there. But if you are capable, let's say the Patriots, let's say they landed T. Higgins. You've got T. Higgins on the outside. You have Ja'Lynn Polk as your Z. You've got Pop Douglas in the slot. You've got Javon Baker developing, and you can move him around a little bit. You're taking your time with Kendrick Bourne because of the ACL. I think he's going to start the year on PUP. I've said that. I'll be consistent on that. I think Bourne is headed to the PUP. But if you could swing a deal at any point from now until the end of the preseason, that's a pretty damn good wide receiver room. Like if I told you Higgins, Polk, Pop, Baker, and Bourne, that is so much better than what we've seen the last couple of years from this team. So much better. What do I expect to happen? I expect Elliott Wolf to be patient. I think he'll be patient. We see how they are slowly rolling out Drake May. They're handling him with kid gloves early. They're building up the fundamentals, the foundation of the rookie quarterback. So there's not a ton of rushing by this team right now, which is the right way to go about this. They're starting with their veterans. They're seeing if the rookies can compete with those veterans. They're slow rolling May to make sure that he has that foundation before they throw him into the deep end. And I've said this. I said it before the draft, said it during the draft. I say it now. This team, it's not about 2024. Yes, we want them to compete. We want them to win some games. We want fun football to watch. But this is not about 2024. This is about 2025, 2026, 2027. So I believe Elliott Wolf has that in mind. He wants to give these younger guys some reps. He wants to give these guys an opportunity. So I think Ja'Lynn Polk and Javon Baker will get more than enough opportunity throughout this camp and preseason to prove themselves worthy of getting significant snaps this year. So I don't think Wolf is going to rush into anything. He's going to be patient. He's going to check out how this wide receiver 5 battle ends up. And then he'll make some decisions. All right, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review. Subscribing is for free, costs you nothing. If you want exclusive content, you can check out the Patreon page. I'm really excited about Friday. So on the Patreon page, just give me 30 seconds. I'll get right back to the Patriots. Trust me, I want to talk more about Ja'Lynn Polk. But the Patreon page, $5 a month, $1.25 a week. You get an exclusive podcast on Wednesday night. I'm going to cut that a little bit later on for the members over there. And now I'm adding a second podcast. So if you like the Celtics talk, I do more Celtics, Bruins, and Red Sox on the Patreon. I'm also adding a second podcast on Fridays as the members head into their weekends. It's going to be called Off the Cuff. I'm going to do some national stories. I'm going to do some fun stories. I'm going to talk about my personal life a little bit. So that podcast debuts on Friday. So exclusive content, some fun content. Check it out. Patreon.com/Nick Cattle, Cattles. All right. Let's get to Ja'Lynn Polk for a few minutes. I understand that Patriots fans, they have wide receiver PTSD. They think about the draft. They think about N'Keal Harry. They think about Tyquan Thornton. I understand. I get it. Ooh, as I almost knocked my microphone over. I understand. I truly understand. That's what happens when you're Italian and you talk with your hands. I truly understand the draft PTSD after what happened with N'Keal Harry and what looks like could happen with Tyquan Thornton after the first couple of lost years. But let's look at Ja'Lynn Polk. Let's look at him with opened eyes, a clear mind. Let's look at these guys and start anew. And I want to look at Polk. And he's been described as Jakobi Meyers with more juice. And this is interesting. I went back and I looked at Jakobi Meyers' combine numbers, and I compared them with Polk. So Polk is 6'1". Meyers is 6'1". Polk is 203 pounds. Meyers was 203 pounds. Polk's 40-yard dash was a 4.52. Meyers was a 4.63. Polk's 10-yard split time was 1.52. Meyers was 1.56. Polk's vertical jump, his leap was 37.5. Meyers was 37. Polk's broad jump was 10.9. Meyers was 9.8. So some of those numbers are eerie, right? When you look at height, weight, I would even say the vertical jump. But the idea of Polk being Meyers with a little bit more juice comes into play when you look at the 10-yard split time, in the 40-yard dash time, in the broad jump. 40-yard dash, again, Ja'Lynn Polk, 4.52. Meyers was 4.63. 10-yard split, Polk was 1.52. Meyers was 1.56. Broad jump, Polk was 10.9. Meyers was 9.8. What those numbers show you is more explosivity from Ja'Lynn Polk. They show you that he has more yak capability than Jakobi Meyers. That's why everybody was saying at the time of the draft that Ja'Lynn Polk was a Jakobi Meyers with more juice. Same size guy, same vertical, but he's quicker, he's faster, and he's more explosive when you look at the broad jump. Now, what did Meyers do in his rookie season? He had 26 catches, 359 yards, and 0 touchdowns. Remember, Meyers had 0 touchdowns through his first 2 years. And I have bigger expectations for Polk than Meyers. I'll tell you why in a minute or two, but first let's jump to a super chat. My friend Charlie, who has supported this program pretty much from day one. Charlie's a Patreon member. He'll tell you all about the Patreon. Do we really want to drop the bag now with the young offense? What are your thoughts on holding off for a year or two down the line for that wide receiver 1 type? The way that the draft, kind of went, right, Charlie? The double dip at wide receiver. The fact that you got Pop Douglas from last year's draft. I'm not going to count anything with Kayshon Boutte because who knows? Who knows what the league is going to say with the whole gambling thing. Mayo said this week that they're waiting for the league. So I don't know what's going to happen with Kayshon Boutte. But you could certainly make the argument that you're making. The fact that they have Drake May and that they're likely not going to start May week 1, I don't think it's a terrible idea, the way this has unfolded, to wait on a wide receiver 1. However, what I would say is, if you have the opportunity and you don't have to necessarily overpay via draft capital, then I would still be prone to make that move. If you could get Brandon Ayuk, for example, and not have to give up just a ton of assets, I would make that move. But I would not be showing desperation. I would not be bending over backwards to acquire one of those guys because, again, you're slow rolling Drake May. The idea of bringing that alpha number 1 guy was because you would be playing your quarterback, starting your rookie quarterback, and he would need that security blanket. But again, A, I don't think May is going to be starting week 1. B, you double dip that wide receiver in the draft. So I'd like to see what Polk and Baker can do as they grow together and develop with Drake May. C, you don't have, as of right now, what we know, you don't have a bona fide left tackle. There's still question with that. So if you might be less prone to deal a first round pick for next year, because I think one of the things you'd be looking at if you finish in the top 7 or 8 is drafting one of the best left tackles that will be available to you in the draft next year. I'm not going to go down that road too far because it's, a year away, but there are a couple of guys that play tackle that are seen as top, 5 to 7 prospects in next year's draft. So it's all about the price, Charlie. If it's a reasonable price, draft asset-wise, I'd still make the deal, but I don't have the same kind of desperation. I'd be fine with not overextending and letting this play out with Polk and Baker and Pop and see what you have with that young nucleus, and then you kind of go from there. You take your time with May, you develop the rookie wide receivers, you continue to develop Pop, and then you have a better gauge of what you have in-house. So then maybe next offseason, you might be a little bit more desperate because the guys didn't play like you thought they would play. So right now, I said this with Juju. Right now, yesterday's podcast, I'm okay with being patient and letting this camp play out. I'm not going to sit here and say that there's no possible way that Javon Baker, could pop, right? All of a sudden, he could be pretty damn good. Like Javon Baker might end up showing you by middle of this season that he's capable to play the X full time. Ja'Lynn Polk, I'll get to him in a minute, continue the thoughts on him, but, give Ja'Lynn Polk an opportunity to prove himself. Give Juju Smith-Schuster an opportunity to prove that he's more healthy this year than he was last year and push that wide receiver room. So, I think you can be a little bit more patient now the way the draft unfolded and what you have on this roster. But you strike if you have the opportunity because they have a ton of cap space still. They have a ton of cap space left right now. They'll have a ton of cap space, and I mean a ton, next offseason. So if the deal is right, then you add the talent. But I would not overextend myself. I'd be willing to be a little bit patient and see what Polk and Baker and those guys do. Appreciate the super chat, Charlie. All right. I expect Ja'Lynn Polk to be better than Jacoby Myers in his first year. That would not be saying a lot. Again, Myers, is 26 catches, 360 yards or so, 0 touchdowns. But I think Polk has the opportunity, has the ability to be an immediate contributor to this offense. He's a better prospect than Tyquan Thornton. I think he's a better prospect than N'Keal Harry. When you compare N'Keal Harry's draft and, this draft and where those guys would go, I think Polk, mano a mano, is a better prospect on the field than N'Keal Harry. N'Keal Harry was, look at his body, look at his athleticism, look at what this guy can do at his size. Great. He was, awesome. T-shirts, shorts, ready to roll. Ja'Lynn Polk, I'm talking on the field, is a better prospect than Harry was. He's a much better prospect than Tyquan Thornton. He played against a much higher level of competition. He played, a ton of snaps at that level of competition. When Jalen McMillan went out, Jalen Polk, stepped up and was the number one or number two, aside from Rome Odunze at Washington for Michael Penix. So, for people that look at the prior drafts and where the Patriots went wrong in the first and second round, drafting wide receivers. Think about the type of receiver they drafted. Tyquan Thornton was a thought, right? He has great speed. We can develop him into something great. N'Keal Harry, again, wasn't what he did on the field as much as it was, he's Herm Edwards' guy. And, again, he has this great body. And, if you have some kind of delusions, he could be a number one guy because of that size and the athleticism. But on the field, he was never really proving much of anything. In college, his tape wasn't awesome. Like Ja'Lynn Polk is the antithesis of Thornton and Harry. Like, his numbers are not going to jump out at you at the combine. But on the field, and this is why we talk about Elliott Wolf watching film. He's a film guy. On the field, Polk plays faster. On the field, Polk made the catches consistently that you prayed N'Keal Harry could make. The tough one-on-one contested catches, right? Turning his body around, making these Cirque du Soleil kind of catches. Go watch the Michigan State tape. And Ja'Lynn Polk just makes a couple of crazy catches in that game. Tight coverage, doesn't matter. Polk's hands and his ability to win these one-on-ones in contested catches is what you hoped N'Keal Harry would be one day. So he's a completely different type of wide receiver. He is much more ready to walk in day one and help this team, contribute to this offense. Even Jacoby Myers, you go back, the level of competition was a question. He didn't play a ton of snaps his rookie year. He was also the whole quarterback wide receiver hybrid kind of story. Everybody loved it. So he wasn't nearly as polished as Polk is. So this is a completely different guy. Completely different guy. And I think, the importance of Polk for May is significant here. As you try to develop this, this young quarterback to be the future of your franchise. I just love the idea of having somebody like Ja'Lynn Polk, who figures to be very dependable. Again, he's not super polished. He's not perfect when it comes to route running, but you feel like you can get him there. And he's somebody that has made play after play after play after play against good competition. And so I love the idea of Polk being that security blanket for Drake May. That gets me excited. A guy that Drake May can trust, a guy that he has chemistry with. And when you look at Ja'Lynn Polk and what he does well, it really fits. It really fits what May wants to do and what Alex Van Pelt wants to do. Ja'Lynn Polk is not afraid to go into the middle of the field, not afraid to catch a slant route. He's not afraid to get into traffic and catch a football. He's also good downfield. As I mentioned, really good downfield on contested catches. So, when you look at Ja'Lynn Polk's game and what he does well and what Drake May does well, they really are a perfect marriage. Is it going to be awesome? I don't know. But again, just watching the film and reading about these guys, their games fit. And they have a connection already. And it's not just because of the Bruins footage that we saw. They have a connection. Scout DNFL posted this. The common traits I consistently hear with both Drake May and Ja'Lynn Polk: competitive, dog, leader, lives for the game. Mayo and Wolf are building a culture of guys that are going to come to work every single day and get pissed off if they lose. The level of comfort between May and Polk is obvious. And as long as they continue to build that communication and build that trust, you'll have better on-field production. I would not be surprised if Ja'Lynn Polk ends up this year with, 45 catches, 600 yards, a handful of touchdowns, continues to get better as the year goes on, develops that relationship with May on and off the field. And I think people will feel a lot different about Ja'Lynn Polk after year one than they felt about N'Keal Harry or Tyquan Thornton. I know that's not saying much, But again, those are the comparisons, and that's the PTSD because of where those guys were drafted. I think Ja'Lynn Polk will, at least at times and stretches this year, look like a second-round pick, somebody that was worthy of being drafted where he was. I think he'll end up looking dependable. He'll be productive when he's asked to be productive, and he will continue to create that bond with the future of this franchise and Drake May. Like, comment, subscribe for free. Doesn't cost you anything. Takes a second of your time. Like, comment, and subscribe. Rate and review. Rate and review Spotify and Apple Pods. Always appreciate you. Appreciate your support. Back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Patreon members, be on the lookout for a podcast later on today. I'll be talking about a possible secret weapon for the Patriots offense. Also, Drew Holiday. We'll dive a little bit deeper into Drew Holiday and what he's done recently in the playoffs. And a Bruins offseason checklist. That's coming up for the Patreon people later today at that website. I'm back tomorrow with more Patriots and stuff right here on the Nick Cattle Show.